Welcome to the Seafood Matters podcast. I'm your host, Jim Cowie. In each episode, I speak with industry leaders, fishery scientists, fishermen, and seafood chefs. We'll highlight the importance of seafood in our daily lives, economy, and environment. Whether you catch your own seafood, love cooking it, or want to learn more about where your fish comes from, you'll find it all here on the Seafood Matters podcast. If you enjoy this episode, hit subscribe, share it with a friend, or leave a 5-star review. And you can get in touch with me by visiting seafoodmatterspodcast.com. Stelios Theocharous was born in Cyprus, and after studying in the UK, he worked for his family fish and chip shops, which they still own. In 2006, Stelios established Ceres, a butter supply company named after the Roman goddess of harvests, which supplies and advises the UK frying and restaurant trades. And if this wasn't enough for one man, he also hosts and produces the Ceres Podcast, which regularly appears in the top 100 food podcasts in the UK charts. Having forged close relationships with chefs, food producers, growers, hoteliers, suppliers, and restaurateurs, in this episode Stelios discusses why increasing numbers of fryers are cooking imported foreign-caught frozen fish rather than using fresh fish landed by UK boats. And my guest suggests a carefully considered marketing strategy aimed at reminding UK fryers of the benefits of cooking fresh fish, both for them and their customers. Welcome to Seafood Matters podcast, Stelios.
Thank you, Jim, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. You're a big player in the fish and chip game.
I always find that awkward.
Oh.
Just, when someone says you're a big player, no, I'm not, you don't need to change anything. I always find that awkward. Like, I don't feel that I am, but thank you very much for saying that.
Well, I see you as that, and I've obviously, as you know, I've been in the fish and chip game, so it's not like I'm looking from outside looking in and seeing something. No, I thought and I still think your setup is brilliant, which I would really like to talk to you about.
Fantastic.
Your company is World of Ceres.
That's right.
Tell us where you got the name.
So we've only ever had one limited company, and we had some changes around about 2012-ish. And before that, it was just called the Batter Company. And we only ever wanted to make batter, really. We never really had ambitions after founding of making anything else. But then as we learnt more, and we learnt more about what our customers like and so on, we then decided to have a name change, because you couldn't make a curry. Well, you could make a curry sauce and call it the Batter Company curry sauce, but there was too many things going on in that wording. So then I decided that I wanted to choose a name that sort of symbolised sort of cereals and flours and grains and agriculture. And then there's two sort of pagan gods. One was the Roman one, one was the Greek one. And the Greek one was called Demeter, and I thought that was too difficult. And the Roman one was Ceres, and I thought that was a lot easier. And the other added benefit of Ceres is that it's a little planet. And so so we've sort of evolved both of the wordings of Ceres, really. So we've got Ceres, the agricultural god, and then the world of Ceres, which sort of identifies all the little parts of our business, really. We'll decide which one we keep as we move forward, though. So, but yeah, Ceres is the agricultural god to the Romans.
You know, Stelios, as what people say, everybody loves a story.
I think so. I think everything needs a story. I don't think you can start anything in a vacuum. Everything needs a story, and everything actually has a story. So I think it's interesting.
Definitely, but it shows there's some thought gone into it as well. And And that's always good. That's always good. Is your background the fish and chip game?
Yes, it is. So I left school in year 2000. My parents were in fish and chips from, I think, 1978. And my dad still has fish and chip shops now. He's retired now, but they still have fish and chips now. My brother has fish and chip shops. A lot of my cousins have fish and chip shops. Uncles and aunties have fish and chip shops. I think I know a lot of people with fish and chip shops, and that's even before I started my company. So it's very. I guess it's a very good living for people. That is one thing I will say, is that it's a job where if you work hard, serve a good product, it's an honest job. You can't go wrong with it.
Well, you know what they call it, the national dish.
That's true. That's true. And I think it definitely is to some degree. I think, especially it's in. I've not found a person yet that doesn't like fish and chips. I've not found them. You might find someone that says I prefer other things more often, but there's never anyone that said, "Oh, I hate fish and chips." I'm sure they're out there, but they're probably psychopaths or something. We don't talk to people like that, do we?
One interesting thing that I learned, and you'll know if this is true or not. I was on a flight back from Cyprus, your home island. My wife Mary's parents lived out there for a few years. We were on our way back from a flight, sitting beside this guy on the plane. We started chatting. Where do you come from? What do you do? And I was telling him I was in the fishing industry, and he says, "Oh, he was in the fish and chip industry in London." I was staggered, Stelios, when he told me. I'm talking now about late 70s, mid 80s. He said between 90 to 95% of the fish and chip shops in London were Cyprus owned.
I'd say that's likely if you fold, and probably still quite likely today, if you categorize Turkish Cypriots as Cypriots, which would also make sense. So if you've got, I'm breaking it down just to make it easier for people to understand it. You've got, I believe there's just Cypriots, but for people to understand it a bit differently, there's Greek Cypriots and there's Turkish Cypriots. So if you put them all together, then that would make complete sense. That would make absolute sense.
Oh no, I didn't think of the Turkish side. I didn't associate them with the fish and chip game.
Yeah, like a lot of my customers in London are from, a Turkish Cypriot background. I just see them as Cypriot. I don't, it's a complex history. So I just like to refer to everyone as Cypriot, really. I don't really get into the whole political side.
That's interesting because I always associate, and I'm obviously wrong, but I associate Turkish food, Turkish takeaways, almost like Chinese or Indian, very specific to their culture and their food.
Turkish food, definitely. I think that resonates more with Turkey, especially when you're talking like grilled koftas and so on. The Cypriots don't really do grilled koftas as much, as in, especially Greek Cypriots, they definitely don't. But I guess, the cuisine differences are significant because my in-laws come from North Cyprus. They're Greek Cypriots from North Cyprus, and my parents are from, South Cyprus. And the cuisine is massively different. For an island it's a very small island, the cuisine differences are quite spectacular, given how small the population is and how small the island is.
Yeah, that's what. Well, I might be doing them an injustice, but I always associate with when we've been there many times, seen Mary's parents going through all the different parts, the north as well, which was more Turkish owned, and the south, along the whole south coast. But I always associate the Greek Cypriots very business-like, whereas you go into the Turkish sector and they would be chilling out around coffee shops with that wee coffees and playing.
Yeah, well, that's the same in any little village that you go to in South Cyprus or North Cyprus. Yeah, I've been to both, and I almost extensively, I'd say 90% of my time is spent in South Cyprus. But when I go to North Cyprus, it's no different to South Cyprus. It feels eerily the same. I think we were expecting it to be very different, but actually everyone was very similar. And to extend that a little bit, when I meet Turkish Cypriots, I think we're shocked about how similar we are. Like, we just, it is odd. And I think if anything, it just highlights the fact that a lot of people got along perfectly fine before 1974, and then politicians bodged it up. And I think that's something that you see a lot of. And I think I've met Turkish Cypriots that have lost property and land from in South Cyprus, and I've met plenty of Greek Cypriots that have lost lots of land on the north side. So and property and homes. My in-laws lost their house, and I think it's a tragic story. But when it comes down to food and culture, they're very similar. Very similar.
That's yeah, yeah. And going back to yourself, Stelios, did you start World of Ceres thinking there was a gap in the market? Instead of going in with to your dad's business, did you feel there was something that the industry needed?
Sort of. So I think everything evolved itself as we went along. So I worked for my dad for in total, that's about 17 years by the time I finally walked away. And that wasn't a negative. It's just because we'd built up the company to such a point where it warranted me to do such a thing. But I think it wasn't so much that there was a gap in the market. We were using a batter that was perfectly fine for a long time and then just wasn't anymore. The company that we used to buy off couldn't figure out the problem, kept telling us, oh, nobody else has complained. And then you find out actually lots of people had complained. But I was quite a dab hand at like creating products, essentially. I'd always do it. I enjoyed it a lot. And so I just developed a batter mix that I quite like. And we then started making it. And then we had to then make it on a larger scale. So we got a flour miller involved. And that was really the reason. So the gap in the market was exposed to us because, there was nothing else that could fit our needs at the time. Every other batter that we sort of tried in that period, everything was just full of ingredients that we didn't want or need. And I'm sure others wanted them and maybe think they need them, but we just wanted a very clean product. And also, the less you have in a product, the less can go wrong. And when you looked at the batter we were using previously, there was like 15 different things on the label. And the batter we replaced it with, which was our natural batter mix, which is what it got called, had 3 things on the label. So there's a lot less to go wrong. The consistency was a lot higher. And I think that's what we really craved, really, consistency.
Yeah. How did you feel? You must have, credit to you, because you must have felt you were in amongst the big guys, big bullies. I don't know if they were, but the Middletons and of this world.
Well, I guess they've got the way. As a young person, you throw yourself into it and you think it's a fight. As a young person, you're fighting for survival. How old was I when I started the batter company? I was probably like 25, maybe. So you sort of just throw yourself into it. You're like, this is a fight. I've got to win this thing, and you persevere. You push through, and I'm quite a tenacious person anyway, but actually they were just protecting their business and they're fighting off a threat at the same time. Do they play dirty? Yeah, probably. Does everybody play dirty? Probably, when they're up against something like that. And they probably didn't see me as a threat initially. They probably just saw me as an annoyance. And that's another talent of mine, is that I can annoy people. So they probably just thought, he's not going to last long. We'll throw a few obstacles. And I think now, we've been in business, 17 years or something? I can't remember what it is now, but I'm nearly 40, so that tells you roughly. So, in my mind, I truly believe that if you're onto something and the financials stack up, keep going, don't stop. And, I think that we got over the difficult phase. The first 5 years were very difficult. And then after that, the whole business has been built very organically. We've not rushed anything. We've not gone and got huge investment from huge investors, and no one tells us what we can do. And, I don't own 1% of my business. And I'm not knocking that, because other businesses that grow fast and, have a very different business plan that works for them. But for us, we wanted to grow something organically and give it a really strong foundation. And I think that's the only difference, really.
You would probably also, which I remember myself when I was throughout my career, when I would be in amongst bigger guys, you probably do offer something that they can't, and that's a more personal service.
Well, I think I'd never knock anybody. I'm not like that. I'm just not built that way. But I bet they do. I bet they do. I'm not trying to put myself down, because I offer a great service. Everyone that works for me offers a great service, and it's all down to customer perception at the end of the day. I think we do things slightly differently. We supply all our products. We try and supply it in every way possible. So we make sure that customers can get it from their wholesalers, or they can get next day delivery off our website. And on top of that, aside from products, we've always had a mission to share opinions, to share facts, to maybe educate. Well, as long as at the same time as educating ourselves about a topic, we try and put that information out there. We always and this all started in the early days where we were sharing market reports. So when market reports were given to us, we would publish them on our website. And I think at the beginning, everyone thought, oh, they're just trying to ramp up prices. And I think after a while, once people realized that we were just sharing information, they actually started to appreciate it. And now that's evolved to us sharing probably 20 articles a week based on the industry. And then obviously podcasts. And now we're up to episode 140. So I think that we don't just do what we do other things too. And I think that's something I've always wanted to do. I don't just want to be what our core product is. We go above and beyond for our customers. And I think that's the key thing here. And I think everyone in business finds their niche. I think, you've got to support your customers in whatever way they need it. And sometimes it could be training, and other times it could be with information. And I think we try and do everything.
Well, I think you do an admirable job. And if I was to say to you on your podcast, I think they're brilliant, and I really enjoy them. And I'm serious about that. And one of the things I have to say that I found interesting, which we've brushed on in our conversations recently, I've learned things, or I've found out things from your podcast that I think to myself, why has that not been in the national news? Because it was big enough a story for it, and I've never heard it anywhere else. One of them was the company that they've found, was it some acid?
Caustic soda.
Caustic soda. And went into the food chain.
Well, it wasn't even that, the food chain. It was a nightclub bar, and they were... So to give listeners some context, actually, this is part of our sort of Read the News podcast that we do. And it was in a bar, Tiger, very popular bar in London, worldwide bar, I think. They've got worldwide everywhere. And someone, and I think it was a series of failures, someone had put caustic soda in an unlabeled bucket, or with no lid or something. The lid was ajar, in a storeroom that had flickering lights or no lights in a certain part of the storeroom. The barman runs out the back because he's ran out of salt with his salt container, and then uses a receptacle to fill up that. Then goes out the front and puts out shots for 4 people. What shots would it have been? What's it called? Tequila shots. And then 4 people and maybe more, and him himself as well, got harmed by it. And you just think that is a huge series of failures. It isn't just one failure. That's 4 or 5 failures that have all contributed to someone having caustic soda in their mouth. And you think, I just couldn't think of a more horrendous story, to be honest. I was completely shocked when I was researching it and talking about it on the podcast. I couldn't think of anything worse. I use caustic soda a lot in the house to clear the drains. And if you get it on your hand, it burns. It really burns, especially when it's wet, because it's a very, what's the word? It's exothermic. So it can get up to 80 degrees, So imagine that inside your mouth.
Oh, it's just...
Yeah, it's just horrible.
I was looking at it from two ways. I was thinking about it from two ways, Stelios. One, how the person or the people that had it in their mouth, how on earth they would feel, but also from the premises point of view, how on earth they're obviously not going by the environmental health rules. Because that should have been the container should have been labelled and sealed, and they should never have been able to get access to that even by mistake.
Yeah, see, I'm quite obsessive about things like this. So obviously we make 2 cleaning products, and then another product that treats potatoes. So, and these products all need to be treated like a kosh product. They're all chemicals, and you need to respect them. And it's not that they need to be locked away, but you need to do a kosh assessment. You need to figure out, how dangerous is this, or how safe is this? Where does this go? Should I have access? Should anybody be allowed to use this? I think the answer is to all of those questions. You'll figure it out when you do an assessment. And clearly this slipped through the net. In our business, for example, only certain people can do certain tasks. And if that person isn't there that day, then it just has to wait. You can't just do it. You can't. We don't just allow people to say, well, I've seen someone else do it, so I'll do it quickly. No, because that's where these errors happen. And so I think for me, horrendous things like this they're never one big issue. There are always lots of little issues that become one big issue. And a lot of the time, these little issues could have been prevented if someone said, 1 minute, there's no light in that storeroom. We should have a light. We need to get that fixed ASAP. Or if someone said, 1 minute, why is there a tub over there open? What is in that tub? There's no label on it. No one should use that until we figure out what's inside. At every level, if everyone stepped in when there was a minor problem. But at the time, we're all busy, so we all do it. We're like, oh, forget about it until later. So, and I think that's probably what's happened in this instance.
I don't know if that's altogether fair. We don't all do that.
Well, no, that's probably that's quite right. I know I have a tendency of brushing everybody with tiring everyone with the same brush. So
yeah,
and then I just go back afterwards and correct myself. But I think what I'm getting at is that it's always these minor failures. And I guess if you're from the fishing industry or the oil rig industry, you're trained from early on to not ignore those failures, because
totally.
That's probably why. That's the difference here, is that. But in everyday work life, little failures just mean, well, that's not my job, and now I've got to do it. And but on an oil rig or in the fishing industry, missing a little minor failure can result in death. So I think that's probably what. Yeah,
that's not restricted to oil rigs and fishing boats. Even when I had the restaurant in the kitchen, we had for our inspection, when the EHOs visited us, we had to show them that all our chemicals were in a separate place.
Yeah.
Not if there weren't just like washing up liquid, or
I do wonder if you're the exception, not the rule, because I know plenty of EHOs that don't check any of that, and I know, and I think that they'll deal with what's in front of them at the time. So I do wonder if maybe you had a very good EHO that was keeping you on your toes somewhat.
Well, we always felt, speaking to other people, friends of mine, maybe in different areas, the thing that was wrong we all felt about the regulations. It was how the EHO in that area perceived it. There wasn't a written law for everybody to follow. It's how they interpreted it, how that particular EHO or whichever region they were in interpreted the law.
Yeah, I get that.
And what has happened to Tiger?
As far as I can see at the moment, they've had £100,000 fine, but that's just it at the moment. That is a fine, I think, paid to the local council at the moment, which must be nice for the local council. As for everyone else here, whether there's insurance claims involved, that wasn't said. But at the moment, I think it was £100,000. Without looking, I couldn't confirm that. But yeah, it's a tough one. It is a tough one.
Yeah, indeed, definitely. Going back to the fishing industry, the fish and chip industry. I hate saying it, but when I think of the fish and chip industry, I'm almost, as far as the fishing industry is concerned, it's almost past tense. Because fishing industry, they're a major user of the fish landed in this country was going to the fish and chip industry. If you, even to this day, Stelios, you go to Peterhead Market and look at all the grades of fish, just say for instance, one species haddock, you get all the species, the sizes, obviously they're grade 1, 2, 3, 4, but they have names as well. So the biggest will be jumbo haddock, then large, then medium, and as it comes down, a size way above the smallest is called chipper haddock. And that's how that started, because that's the size the fish and chip industry wanted. So you speak to any fisherman, they'll tell you about chippers or chipper haddock. But I don't think the fish and chip industry in the UK now even get 5% of their fish from UK caught fish, which I think is dreadful.
Well, what do you, because you know this industry better than, that part of the industry better than me, what do you perceive as, where has that gone wrong? What created the decline in that usage, do you think?
I would probably say, Stelios, come back to you and say something very similar to how you described the problem for Tiger. A lot of small things rather than one.
Yeah.
Big. I don't think it's just a case of the industry saying, right, come on, we're moving on. I don't think that's what happened. I think price played a factor. A very hard marketing campaign from the Norwegians and Icelandic and people like that. And a convenience, because they could, fish and chip shops could phone a supplier, order almost like they would order ball bearings off a shelf, whereas they would have to order a day or two in advance from, say, Peterhead or Scrabster, and wait for deliveries, and if there's any disruptions or whatever. So there was a number of factors come into play. But I just feel it's really sad to see, because there's still a lot of that fish coming into the UK, and they've a lot of it because there's been a massive drop in the amount of processors they are. There's nothing like the processing capacity in this country, fish processing capacity now to there was in the past. And so that it's fish that's desperately needing a market. And the market's there, but they're getting supplied from somebody else.
So I feel like I'm asking you more at the moment. I'm sure I'm making notes. I'm thinking, what could flip the switch?
I think, well, if people would practice what they preach. Now, I've spoken directly to it, so I'm not going behind his back, but is it either the president or chairman of the NFFF, National Federation of Fish Fryers, talks about supporting UK fishermen, but buys his fish, he imports his fish. So that's a start. But they're really entrenched in the industry now, because you look at the Fish and Chip Award, it's sponsored by Norway. So they're really entrenched in the industry.
So you know the industry quite well. Is there like there's a Norwegian seafood, an Icelandic seafood organisation? Is there a Scottish seafood or British seafood organisation?
Well,
and I don't know the answer to that. So
yeah, there's organisations, there's federations and associations, but no, nothing like what you're. It would be individual.
I see. So there's nothing. There's no collective. There's no collective of, I don't know, Scottish seafood. Because I think that's probably, in one way, I think I'm just thinking out loud, and I always think about how there's no real cohesion on that side. I mean, I'm in I'm in a Scottish fisherman group or fishing group, let's say, and they seem to bicker a lot. and I think whereas I think the Icelandics and the Faroese and I don't know too much about these guys either, but there's a cohesive goal that they're all working towards, and yeah, they would all agree that we need to be, let's say, for in this instance, supporting the NFFF in the Fish and Chip Awards. Let's just use that as an example, and if there is any bickering, it doesn't leave the boardroom. I'm sure that there is. I'm sure that they don't always agree on every single little thing. But I think what probably happens is from the Scottish fishing side or the British fishing side is that the decisions are decentralized and they're not working as one group. So I think they've lost that power in some ways to say, let's all work together. We're going to set aside X amount of levy money that we've got to sponsor the awards. And I would imagine, I'm not defending Andrew here because I know it's Andrew that you're talking about. I don't know if you mentioned his name, but I don't have any involvement with the awards. But I would imagine that if you rang him, not you, but someone from let's just make up a fictional title, the Scottish Seafood Board, and if there isn't one, there should be, and they should ring him and say, we'd like to sponsor a category for the awards, just like the Norwegians do. And I think if that was a thing, and you mentioned earlier like clever marketing or hard marketing, I think that you could probably claw back some of that, that business, let's say. One thing I've always wondered is, well, no, before I get on to what I've always wondered, you mentioned convenience. I don't think there's anything more convenient than having chilled fish delivered to my door in fillets with no skin on, no bone in. That's the most convenient product. Whereas buying a frozen product, it's probably convenient in some ways, but you're never going to find the perfect piece of fish that comes to you frozen. And that's not to say that frozen's bad or chilled is bad or good. They're equally, for me, seafood is seafood. I love seafood. So, but I was just wanted to say that I think that's a plus point for chilled fish, that it's coming to your door completely prepped, ready to use. And I've seen shops, and I used to do this, where you'd open the box, put it in your fish tray, and you could serve it immediately, needed no work. Whereas the same can't be said for some frozen at sea fish. Well, actually, there's some frozen at sea fish, like very tightly graded, with no bone and no skin. So you could. But whereas chilled fish, it comes ready to go. So that's a plus point for you guys, in my opinion. But one other thing that I was always wondering, and I've never managed to get the answer off anybody, but I think you might know the answer, but it might also fall into lots of other little bits. When Frozen at Sea started to become prominent, let's say, or let's say you could see the trajectory and it was becoming popular, why didn't the British ever say, we should do this, we should get some boats and do this? Why is it we stayed to like chilled day boats? Why is that?
Just the nature of the fishing, nature of the industry. For one thing, boats, the fishing grounds weren't as far away from where they were, so they weren't having to steam as far, so they wouldn't need to be out so long. And depending on the depth of water and the tides and just the geography, there's a few small things come together there as well. And there wasn't the need for that. There used to be freezer trawlers, UK, but they were maybe fishing in Iceland, White Sea, and things like that. So, but going back a bit, I take your point, and it's valid that you made. When you see you have a one body that you talk to in Norway or Iceland, if you see 10 fishing boats leaving Peterhead, 10 fishing boats leaving Scrabster, that's 20 boats that are out in the grounds competing against each other. They come in, they land their catches, they go on to the fish market to be auctioned, and there's individual fish merchants bidding against each other. So it's competition all along the way.
I'd imagine that competition exists, and I'll just use Iceland as an example. I'd imagine that competition exists there, surely. But I think what I'm suggesting is that on a higher level, you need longer term goals. You can't just have daily goals. You can't just say like that. The daily goals are what you just mentioned, which is we're all in competition with each other. You know, we need to sell this product for X, and I want such a supplier to buy it, and I want him to sell it or her to sell it to whoever. So I guess you've got daily goals, but then you need your long term goals. And I'll give you an example. So have you ever heard of FASFA? FASFA. It's an organization, and I think it's Frozen at Sea Fillets Association, and they're based over here. And this is all, from what I gather, because I don't know too much about them. I've had a couple of their members on the podcast, but I don't know too much about how it operates. But they're all members that basically sell frozen at sea fish over here. So they're merchants, but they all have daily goals. So within each, they all compete with each other every day, I would imagine. So Smales is a member, and Smales would compete against, I'm trying to think of another one, let's say Frozen at Sea Fish, FAS 2000, let's say. So they compete with, Colbeck's would probably be in it, I would imagine. And they all compete with each other daily, because they're all selling, Frozen at Sea Fish. However, they've also got long-term goals that they need fulfilling as a business. And I would imagine hard marketing, which is what you mentioned earlier, could be one of those aspects. Because if they work together as a collective, then it's a rising tide effect. Whereas you could still compete with each other every day. That's, I'm not suggesting they wouldn't. But at the same time, they have a long-term goal, which is, in this instance, to make progress in people's understanding of frozen at sea fish. And I think when you have a centralized marketing plan like that, a centralized goal, you could really succeed. And I think that's probably what's missing on the other side, because I would imagine, again, just, if you guys, when I say you guys, because I'm going to make you the president of this fictional organization, if you guys had a central command, you could essentially do all those things. But I think what happens every day is, instead, and I've seen it in one of these fishing groups that I'm in, everyone just sort of bickers a bit. Oh, well, we don't get this. Oh, well, shippers don't buy more of our product. Why don't they buy more of our product? Well, There's no emphasis. I run a business, and I can't just wait for people to knock on my door and say, "Can I buy your product?" You have to be active in selling that product, and just saying, "Oh, well, why don't they support British or Scottish in this instance?" Well, because people don't think like that. I don't think many businesses wake up in the morning and say, "I need to use a product because it's from X." I think first their mindset would be, and I'm just guessing here, but I think because I run a business too, and we use all British flour, but I think I'm glad first that it's great flour first. If British flour was terrible, then I wouldn't want to use British flour if it was terrible. Do you understand where I'm coming from? And I'm not suggesting any product here is terrible, by the way, but I'm just trying to build the backstory that I think most people just want great quality product at a great price, consistently priced. And I think one of the things I remember when I used to order haddocks for my dad when I used to run his business, and we used fresh back then in my time, or chilled fish as they call it. And I remember every day there was a fluctuation in price every day. And I remember when I was at the business by this point, and they'd moved over to frozen at sea. And one of the things they mentioned was that they liked that stability, not worrying that every day the price had changed. And I know it was only a couple of quid here and a couple of quid there. Maybe if there was something extreme happening, it would jump 10, £15 a stone. But that would be an extreme issue, an extreme sort of situation. But I think for the most part, people didn't like that, talking to all my family members that would have all used fresh or chilled product back then, now probably use frozen at sea. I know a few use chilled haddock, but I think for them they just didn't like the fluctuations. And I think that's another thing. If and you can't really do this with a wild product, I guess. Well, you can, I guess, because frozen at sea is wild. How is it that they can hedge their prices for such a long time? And I'm not suggesting that anybody makes a loss, clearly, but I think it's that stability, that volatility that people didn't like, because there's enough volatility with potatoes and everything else that's going on. So, yeah, pretty long answer there. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I take everything you're saying there, and I totally accept that stability is one part of it, definitely. But a bigger part of it, I would have to say, although I might have a fish fryer been calling me up to complain, but it's more to do with price. They're cheaper. I have never in 30 years ever known the frozen at sea fish to be dearer than the fresh local chilled fish. But the other thing we can't lose sight of, although they have that organisations in Norway and that, there's still fresh boats catching their fish fresh, landing it on markets and being sold by auction the same as us. And that's in Iceland, Faroe. I've been on the auctions. I've had fish from through that way. So yes, there is big organisations that handle the frozen at sea because they own the freezer trawlers that are doing that. But every one of them, Denmark, Holland, right up by Norway, they've all got similar systems to us. I know Scottish boats that have gone into Norway and into Hanstholm in Denmark and places and landed their fish for the auction there.
Yeah, I guess there's always going to be these conversations, and I think as long as I've been in the industry, I think it's always been a hot topic, and I guess I can only give you my take as why I think that, because I'm not involved in that that business anymore. But obviously, I talk to a lot of people, and no one I know uses frozen at sea fish because it's cheaper. That much I do know. One thing I know about people is that about the people that I talk to is that they use it because of consistent pricing, and I think I think this is where everyone thinks cheaper. No, I think they mean that for 90% of the time, there's not a lot of fluctuation. And I think last year, because I think if that's the case, that price is really important to people, then last year when we saw frozen at sea prices go was it last year or the year before, go massively through the roof, that should have put a lot of pressure on chilled fish because everybody would have been jumping ship. And I don't think that really happened. Well, you'd know better than me if that happened.
What I find is, I was going to say amusing, but it's not amusing. But it's very telling. Any fish and chip shop I've been in, Stelios, and asked them, what fish do they have and where do they get it? On every occasion, I've never ever been told Norway, Iceland. It will be a standard answer is it's sustainable North Atlantic.
Okay. So, I don't know, again, like, not to be just on the opposite side of this for no reason. Maybe we just see different people, but I don't see that. I see shops that have a blackboard in the shop, and they're telling us where the potatoes come from, where their fish comes from. It will say Barents Sea, Faroese. Sometimes they put the ship name. And now that's not everybody, clearly. The good thing is you got going for you, I'd imagine 90% of fish and chip shops in London use chilled cod. And they all say Billingsgate Market for the most part because they see that as a sense of pride that they're buying from Billingsgate. So, yeah, and look, is there bad traders? Yeah, I've been into shops where it says cod on the menu, and I go out the back and there's frozen hoki in the water in the sink defrosting, and that I've seen that twice in London at 2 different locations. So there's bad traders everywhere you go. And he didn't have hoki on the menu because that would have been fine if he did, but he didn't. And I think you're always going to see traders that are like that. That never stops. And that's why I was really interested in what the Australians have done, where they've now passed a law that says that if you're using seafood, you've got to say where it's from. And I think they've gave it a little rating as well. I can't remember exactly what it is. It's A for Australian, and there's something else, but there's three levels apparently, and I think that's really good. I'm a big fan of everybody telling people where their products come from and believe in it. If you're using Norwegian, use it proudly. If you're using Scottish, use it proudly. Tell consumers they can make an informed decision. But I'd imagine, and I might be wrong, I think Scotland again is a very strong market for chilled fish. I don't know many shops in Scotland that use frozen at sea. I'm sure they exist, but I'd say they're the exception, not the rule. I would imagine Scotland's predominantly chilled. So I can imagine then they wouldn't want to put up a sign saying, "Well, I use Norwegian fish," because that's probably not going to go down very well. But again, customers will vote with their feet. The more information you can give them, customers will vote with their feet. So, yeah, that's my thoughts.
I'm sorry I have to correct you there.
Go on.
Sadly, there is as low a percentage of fish and chip shops in Scotland using fresh, chilled Scottish fish than it is.
That genuinely surprises me. Genuinely.
And even sadder to me, I could go around the fishing ports of Scotland and even some fish and chip shops, even up here with us, right in the far north of Scotland. There'll be fish and chip shops within 2 to 3 mile radius of Scrabster using frozen at sea.
That's very surprising to me. Very surprising. I think maybe some sort of poll would be interesting. Maybe I'll do that later on Facebook. But I genuinely, when I ever speak to anybody in Scotland, they're always talking about angel cut chilled fish. That's something I see a lot of. Angel cut haddocks. which I've only ever seen in Scotland. And a lot of the fish and chip shops I follow in Scotland seem to have angel cut or just a single fillet. But you'd know better than me in that respect. So, but which is interesting.
I don't know better than Stelios about the fish and chip industry, so I wouldn't say that. When you mention that there, have you seen an angel cut fish?
Mm-hmm.
That's the way my father filleted. What's what he learned. What a beautiful fillet.
It must be hard to do, surely. Like,
Well,
you can't...
it's quite labour intensive because you have to take both fins off, the top fin and the bottom fin, and then pull the skin off. So it's it's labour intensive. It takes longer, obviously, to fillet. So just say a box of fish, it would take longer to fillet, but you would have a much better yield.
Okay, I see.
Because
so I was going to say, where did that filleting style come from? So I guess it's a yield, a yield benefit.
Yeah. Well, you're coming down the belly flap, and when you get to the bottom of the belly flap, the angel cut goes out. So the wing, what calls it an angel is a wing. Now, so you've got a wing at the bottom of the gut cavity. It goes out and takes all that flesh off. Hence the angel cut, because it looks like wings. Now, on an ordinary block fillet, which keeps the two sides together the same way, it just goes straight. You just go straight down. So you're definitely getting a much better yield. I would say it could be maybe not quite 10% more, but 7 or 8% more.
Okay. All adds up, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it's much better going on the slab than going in the offal barrel.
Well, yeah, of course. You're not going to get much for it with the offal barrel, are you?
So. No, that's for sure. So the other thing I always fear with not buying UK is you're supporting locals, and also the old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. That's my fear.
Yeah, I think the second point you make, it's always worrying to see an industry declining and going away. That's not nice. You're losing skills, you're feeding communities and so on. However, I guess many would argue the first point, which is you're supporting local. Well, I guess a lot of other people that sell frozen at sea fish, they're a local business in their minds, and they're in Hull and Grimsby, and I think they're still in the traditional fishing sites. They all go hand in hand, in my view. I when I've been to Hull and seen the fresh fish markets, you only have to look over the road to see frozen fish sales. So I'd imagine that economically, local is local, regardless of what fish you buy. I think it'd be a shame to see the skills go, but I don't want to. I just want to reiterate that I wouldn't lay the blame all on the business owner's choice. I think that if there is limitations, and if anybody's listening to this and think, and you've put me in touch with some great people in the fishing industry, and I've had them on my podcast, and I think if they're listening to this thinking, people should buy more British fish or British seafood or Scottish fish, then I think that someone needs to say, let's put an organisation together, let's put some funds behind it, and let's have a central vision, and let's start with a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, and say, let's increase the knowledge, that let's get more people using this product, and I think that's the way to do it. And I know they're probably going to say, well, I'm in competition with such and such, and why should I do this? But I think you can have two goals at the same time. You can have the goal of selling your fish against the guy next door, and you can have the goal of also lifting the tide. Because if there's an organization out there that is, let's say, making the pie bigger, then competition doesn't matter as much because the pie is bigger. Competition only matters when the pie is getting smaller. So that's
right.
what. So if there is somebody with a desire out there to sit down with all the fishermen, the processors, to say, look, we have a common goal here, and our common goal is to sell more Scottish fish. It doesn't matter what we do every day because we can bicker about that all day long. Oh, you sold it for 50p less. And that's always going to exist. That's never going to go away. However, if you could create a collective to say, let's all try and get more customers, all of us. Let's try chip away at the competition. And in this instance, you perceive frozen at sea fish as a competition. So if that's the case, what can we identify that's better than that? Where are our shortcomings? Where are we better? Let's promote where we're better. Let's try fix our shortcomings. And I think that way, it is a longer process, but I think that's probably the way I'd do it if it was up to me. Is it easy? Probably not. I'm not suggesting getting 100 people in a room to all agree on the same outcome is going to be easy. But I do think it's the most logical solution.
I accept what you're saying, and I like your direct response rather than trying to agree or faff around it. And really, what comes ringing through my head as I'm hearing you, which is the old saying, which I would say is relative to this, and it's very true. You can have doesn't matter if it's the fishing industry or any other industry, you can have the best product in the world, but you still have to sell it.
It's true. It's so true. And you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, you said about a good story, and a good story is what makes everything. And the competition in this instance, and let's say it's the Faroese, the Icelandics, and all of them individually because they're not working together, but the Faroese, the Icelandics, the Norwegians, and the Russians, let's say, they all have an individual story, constantly talking about all of their pros. They never talk about the negatives, obviously. Why would you? But they always talk about their sustainability and blah, 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 blah. Whatever's good, they've got that story. And nobody collectively is pushing out the Scottish seafood story. And that's why, or even the British seafood story. And that's why it gets left behind. Because if you're not saying anything, then no one can hear anything. So who's doing case studies with the fish and chip shops that use your products and saying, this product's fantastic, I'd never use anything else, I love it, and I'm also supporting the local economy, and I'm supporting Scrabster fishermen, and I'm supporting the Peterhead market. I love this product and I'd never be without it. Those stories are not being told. However, every week those stories are being told about the other products, and I think that's the problem here, is that no one is, so when we talk about, oh, we should use local and stand up for your product, the consumers, let's say the people that use your product, that's all well and good, but at the same time the people that sell the product and catch the product and fillet the product aren't doing that. And that's what I see as an outsider. I see that nobody's screaming from the rooftops about how great your product is. Do you get me?
Totally get you. And the other thing that comes to mind when you're mentioning, you're bringing up my own words again, with loves a story, I would say there's maybe just one person we can speak to do something, and because there's nobody tells a story like Jimmy Buchan.
No, it's true. And I think if you got Jimmy and you got Alan, who you introduced me to, and Graham, and you got everyone together and start saying, look, how do we have a forward-thinking plan? Like, who could we bring to this table? Before we then get everybody, how can we make this team go from 4 to 10, and then from 10 to 100? And then how can we all discuss how we can move forward? And I think then, once you're having these discussions, you can start saying, how do we grow this thing? And I think it has to be, again, a forward plan where everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet publicly. Privately, there's no point everyone agreeing privately, but there needs to be a resolution. And you need a bit of a budget where you could say, We're talking to shops that use this product and restaurants and so on, and we need to start publicizing it, because that's what the others do. And I don't know if they're getting grants or whether they're using funds from fish sales. That's obviously a question for you guys at that level. But for me, that's the way I'd be going about it.
There's no grants. But the other thing I think of, Stelios, is they're two very traditional industries going back a long, long time, with players in it that have been on the go for a long time. It's just making me think, if we were to, which I'm fully intending doing, kick things off, do you feel that taking the fishing industry, there's some people work just do what they're doing and continue doing it. Other people will have a go and try something new. Do you feel, from your knowledge of the fish and chip industry, do you think there's players in that game that would say, okay, yeah, I'll buy it. I'll give it a go.
I've got many of my customers use frozen at sea and chilled fish all day long. I've got customers that buy frozen at sea cod, chilled haddock, chilled hake, all fresh from the UK. So I know people that do both anyway. And so I can't see why. I think if you're selling that story, the story that you want, let's say, and let's just say in this instance, it's quality and provenance. Those are the two big things in that we're going to push right now. Why wouldn't you pick up a few people? And then the question is, and it's an important question, could the processors and people that catch the product, could they keep up? If you then increase sales nationally by 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, can they keep up? And I think then that's an operational problem. So I don't know the answer to that.
Currently, with the amount of fish that's in the fishing grounds, I would say there's no question.
Fantastic.
There's no question that could happen. That could be the case.
So then all you need then is a marketing effort that's centralized, that acts on behalf of, all of you, everyone who's involved, who's got a stake in the fishing industry. And the way to sell it to those guys that question it, that question everything, let's say, oh, why should I join a federation or a marketing effort? Well, because it's your livelihood. Do you want your children to do this job? If they're 30, 40, you've got another 20 years in this industry. Do you want it to get smaller? And I think that's what I'd be saying, because there's always going to be skeptics, always. So it's a way of seeing as not just preserving, but making the British industry thrive. But I think I'd probably start in Scotland first, because that's where you're a specialist, and I'd start there first and show them how good it is, and then move south and say, look what we're doing in Scotland. We could do this here too. Let's all have another federation, where we all work together, etc. So, but again, I make this sound very simple. I'm not delusional to the fact that me saying it on a podcast is going to make it happen.
Totally accept that, Stelios, and I don't see it that way. And you're right. Things are never anything worth doing. It's worth doing properly, and there is the logistics don't make it just simple. Press button A instead of B, and yeah, we're going. It needs to be thought through, but I certainly feel. And a lot of people could accuse me of standing back and say it's easy for me, which it is, and I accept that. But with 50 years knowledge and experience in the fishing industry, what I'm seeing now is there's two major industries. One, catching a product that the other can use, and they're not talking.
I see that.
That's where I'm coming from. But you've certainly stirred me up enough to feel that, well, maybe I can do, even if it's just by talking to people and starting it. I'm sure there's a I would, what I would think we would come out, the first hurdle we would come against, but I think also that's been taken care of because the processing capacity would be a problem if the demand grew very quickly. But we're hearing that two or three of the processors in Peterhead are putting filleting machines in to get lines going to increase their production. So maybe that would fit in with what we're talking about.
And I think I don't know how many Scottish fishermen or processors listen to this podcast, but one thing I would say that many fish and chip shop owners resent in, let's say, the fish and chip groups is if someone just says from that side, let's say from your side, use it because it's local, support British. I think that the argument is more complex than that. And I think it's not, they're not choosing anything else because they don't want to buy British. They're not. I think it is more complex. And I think, so just saying to people, you should buy it because it's British, it's like saying, go buy Austin Allegro because it's British when there's a nice BMW or Mercedes. And I'm not suggesting that one is an Austin Allegro and one is a Mercedes either. I'm just trying to give a bit more context to the fact that it is a bit more problematic than British or not British. I think,
No, I understand what you're saying, but and in fairness, there is a lot of other things going for it. The quality, it's not been frozen, so it's not going through that extra process. It's less time from when the fish was caught until the consumer's eating it, and that's all good from a health aspect.
And I think, and this is why you've got this strong message that isn't being told.
Yeah,
and that is such a shame, because you've got such a strong message, and if nobody's telling it, then no one's hearing it. That's a fact.
Yeah. The other factor that I've been thinking about listening to you, Stelios, is what would be, is there a rule of thumb, is there a percentage of, is fish and chips still big in the fish and chip industry in England, or is, there's lots of other things that people can buy now other than fish and chips?
I think that fish and chips is still as popular as it's ever been. I think that, and in some ways, it's probably very also popular with foreign guests that come to the UK as well, because Asians absolutely love crispy seafood. They live for it. So when they come over, one of the first things they want to eat is fish and chips because they love crispy food. They love fried food. So, but I think if we just look at the British population, I think fish and chips is just as popular as it's ever been. There's a lot of noise from competitors and other foods. But you don't just buy fish and chips at a fish and chip shop now. I think it's better in a fish and chip shop, there's no doubt, or a fish and chip restaurant. But you can buy fish and chips from the local pub now, from the local bistro, from the local gastro pub. So I think it's not, fish and chips isn't exclusive to just fish and chip shops. So yes, there has been a decline in fish and chip shops since the 70s. I think in 1970 or 1980 there was 40,000 fish and chip shops, and now there's approximately 7 to 10,000. But I think fish and chips is sold more. I think it's in just so many more places. Hotels, you get fish and chips everywhere. It's just become synonymous with the UK now. Well, it is the British dish, as we said, but you can get it in every setting now.
Well, that even gives more of an incentive because it just tells us, the fishermen, that market is still there.
Oh, of course it is. For me, there's no bigger market for cod and haddock in this country than fish and chips. That's a fact. Like, it is always going to be the volume business for haddock and cod. No other business can get close to using that sort of volume in my opinion. Even if you look at processors, let's say, for example, if we look at, tell me a frozen brand that does fish. I can't remember the name now. It's lost to me.
Well, you mentioned Smeals earlier.
No, I mean a retail product, retail brand. Who makes the fish fingers? Bird's Eye. You know, even if you look at Bird's Eye, they buy haddock and cod and they fillet it and they bread it and they batter it for their fish and chip range. But they also have Pangasius and they also have products like that. Most fish and chip shops in the UK are doing haddock or cod or haddock and cod. And sometimes if you're in London or so on, they'll do skate and they'll do rock. So I think that there is no bigger market volume-wise than the fish and chip industry, in my opinion. Even restaurants can't get close to what the volume is.
Well, to answer a question you put earlier, as far as the fishing is concerned, this year, 2024, there's been a small increase in the cod quota for fishermen, and a massive increase on the haddock quota because the stocks are healthy. So
and I think again, like, this is another reason it baffles me why there's no central organisation pushing out that message and saying to the end user, we've got more of this. Do you want it? With all the other USPs you've mentioned. So yeah, it baffles me. It really does. And it must baffle people that have probably already tried this in Scotland to put an organisation together that has a collective good.
The biggest problem they have as far as that's concerned is the NGOs, because they have a message out that we're depleting the seas.
Yeah, well, that's been going since I was a kid, and probably since you were a kid, I guess.
Which is just not the case at all, and it's totally unfair. But that's an agenda which we're certainly not going to start getting into, or we'll be here all day.
It'll be till tomorrow.
Going back to your own business, Stelios, you're obviously started in batter, as you've said, but you've a wide product range now.
Well, yes and no. I think that our goal has always been to support frying businesses, people that fry a lot. And then obviously we have some additional products. So I think as long as, again, if it's food service, essentially we do it, but we don't do like Blue Roll, and we won't do like general cleaning products. Everything has a specific use case. That's my thought. So for example, curry sauce is curry sauce. It's a great curry sauce that tastes brilliant, and it's made for fish and chip shops or restaurants that want a curry sauce. Fish cake mix is all about utilizing fish trimmings, and making a fantastic homemade fish cake rather than a frozen bought fish cake with 30% minced white fish, which includes heads and skins and bone. It's all about utilizing what you have on site and using whichever fish that you use, which is pertinent to this conversation, and then all the trimming, so you get the best amount of use out of that product. And then, so again, that's supporting fish and chip shops, restaurants, pubs. And then obviously our deep fryer cleaner, which is the first non-food product that we developed. And that, again, is for keeping your fryers in great condition. And if they're in great condition, then they recover faster. Your oil lasts longer. Your food's crispier. There's so many benefits. So I think everything benefits probably primarily people that fry, and then secondarily people that have a restaurant, let's say, or a food business.
Yeah, I would say, well, if you were to get specific, I would say your fish cake mix is absolutely fantastic. I've had it on board countless numbers of fishing boats, and it makes the process so easy to make. And as you say, you're using the trimmings. I would also, one thing you didn't mention, your mushy peas. What is it?
Seasoning, mushy pea seasoning.
That just makes it the best I've ever tasted.
Well, you probably don't realise this, but the majority of fish and chip shops in the UK use a liquid, and the liquid is basically green. It's tartrazine, which is what makes kids fly around the house and climb walls. And they don't wash their peas, and because they don't wash their peas, they just use the green liquid. And some wash their peas and use the green liquid, but it gives the product a very, very how green is it? I'm trying to think. It's almost like a fire exit green, the green color. It's a very artificial looking product. So the natural pea seasoning was a response to people that wanted a natural green color, but also seasoning all involved. And so that way, rather than weighing out 4 different products, then adding a liquid, you've just got one product that's a powder, and that's it, or granulated powder. The fish cake mix, I don't know if I ever told you this, but how it was developed. I was at a shop, a very busy fish and chip shop, and there was 2 guys filleting in the kitchen, and in between them both, they had a gap in the table with a bin. So they're both filleting, one on the left, one on the right, and they made a makeshift sort of filleting station. And there probably would have been, I reckon, on the day, probably filleting about 10 stone of fish, And it was all skin off, and they were just basically cutting out the bone and cutting the belly a bit and making your portion. And I must have seen them put in the bin probably about, I want to say, 5 to 10 kilos of trimmings. I don't even want to call it waste because it was trimmings, And I remember then it was just baffling me, just thinking about how they could throw this away. And at the same time, they were upset about the cost of fish, how much it cost them. And the things can't ring true. You can't moan that the fish you're buying is expensive, but then also throw away a lot of it.
That's why it's expensive.
And then it's double expensive, isn't it? You've added another cost. And I couldn't get my head around it. And then I was at the butcher's and I was chatting to him because I know him quite well. And he said to me, he goes, "Do you know what we throw away in this business?" And I was like, "No." He goes, "Nothing." His walk around with me. And honestly, there was absolutely nothing they threw away. Everything got sold, and if it didn't get sold, then obviously bones and so on, they get collected. But there's a fee for that too. They'd get something for that. And it just dawned on me that they were making sausages, and I thought, well, fish cake is our sausage in the industry, really. And then I thought, well, I made this fish cake mix, and I went back to the customer and I said, "Hey, try this. Let's make something." And we made it. And he was like, "I need this product. Like, we need this product." And that's how it started. And that was our first product that wasn't already. So every other product we developed, batter already existed, curry already existed, gravy already existed. Fish cake mix did not exist. So that was our first product that was a completely innovative product. And you can make 5 kilos of finished fish cake mix in 20 minutes, and you don't have to stand on top of it. You can carry on doing your other jobs, and it's far superior than using potato, because potato's bland, has a lot of water, and you can't season it as much as you can fish cake mix. So yeah, it's just interesting, really, because I think fish and chip shop owners can also be their own worst enemy. So I don't want to be slating just the Scottish fishermen here, because fish and chip shop owners will be like, "Oh, gas is too expensive," but they've got machines on that are just chewing up gas all day long, and they didn't switch off the hobs, and they're burning up, or they've got 40-year-old light bulbs instead of brand new LEDs. So I think that industry can also be an enemy to itself as well.
2 things you mentioned in the past, which I'll bring together. You mentioned Australia. And you mentioned going round the butchers and no waste. And they make sausages.
Yeah.
You put the 2 together, you go to Australia and you can buy a fish sausage.
Yeah.
So maybe that's...
Well, so you could probably make a fish sausage, which is basically that fish sausage that the Australians use. It has probably descended from the Asian fish sausage. And what that would be finely ground, if not pureed fish, and then mixed with starch and water. So you probably could make that with our alpha coater. So if you got the alpha coater and added it to completely minced fish with some water, you would have that and then fry them off. You could either make balls or sausage. So you probably wouldn't need to skin the product. It would probably, you could skin it if you really wanted to skin it. But by adding the starch, it stops the water from leaving the product and then going dry. That's why sausages are nice and moist, because they have rusk inside. And, so starch would be essentially what the rusk does. It absorbs water, stops it from leaving. So when you eat it, it's got a bit of springiness to it,
Yeah, yeah. One of your other products, which I used, probably not for what its actual purpose, but for something like the fishermen in Scotland call them prawns, like a langoustine tail, and scallops, wild scallops, dredged scallops, and obviously they don't need anything like the cooking time that a thick cod or a haddock would need. And I found absolutely just right on the money. I give you a nice cooked seafood with a lovely crisp batter, was your gluten-free batter.
Yeah, it's a lovely product. Crispy.
Is it because it's lighter?
It's not so much that it's lighter. Well, it is technically lighter, and that's because of one of the ingredients that are in it, which is polenta. So polenta is granulated, so it's quite coarse. So that would essentially let oil in and out a bit differently, and then that makes it quite crispy. So it makes it lighter, essentially. So yeah, it is a lighter product for sure, and it probably works more like a tempura on the products that you just mentioned, which is light and crispy. So yeah, I'd say that it is a nicer product for those smaller items.
Yeah. And where do you see Ceres going as forward?
We're constantly growing this thing. We've now got a fulfillment center where 99% of today's orders will be with people tomorrow. So yeah, it's constant. It never stops, really. We're bringing out new products. We're building a manufacturing facility. It's never ending. I think that you can't afford to stop. Our goal is to keep bringing out more articles, to keep doing more podcasts, keep people informed, making the right decisions. I think we've always had a multi-channel approach. We've always wanted to be offering value to people. So if we can keep offering value to customers, then we will exist for longer. And if we ever stop, then I'm sure the market would be absolutely brutal and send us packing. So I think whatever business you're in, you've got to get that story straight, and you've got to keep providing value to customers. And if you're not providing value to customers, I don't mean value as in cheap. I mean, what is your value to them? What is it that they expect from you? And I think everyone always gets the word value mixed up with cheap. And that's not what I mean. I mean, I actually mean, what's your value proposition? What is it people expect from you? Are you giving them that? And if not, is that because they now want something else? Or is it, no, you've moved the goalpost? So I think we're always identifying what we could be doing better. Always. I'm very self-critical.
I always felt that was a healthy way to look. If there's something not right and you're trying to pinpoint it, look inwards rather than outwards for somebody to blame.
Yeah, that's me all over, to be honest. I take responsibility for everything. There is a team of us, but if something's wrong, I'll take responsibility, because ultimately the buck stops with me. And if something's not right, I fix it. Simple.
It's really interesting when I think of your points, and it's in fairness to you, Stelios, when they talk about practice what you preach, you're making suggestions, not telling, about how Scottish fishermen can get to the market. But in fairness, I think what you're doing is showing, well, you're not just telling somebody else to do something that you wouldn't do yourself, because you are doing it. You've expanded your operation. which I think is commendable. You've built new premises and you're still looking at taking it forward. I think it's...
I think one thing that I want to say as well, because I don't want everyone to think that I'm bashing the Scottish seafood industry here, is that, down to the fact that you've introduced me to some of these people, what I've learned is that it is an incredibly resilient industry, incredibly, and they do care about their product and they do care about the provenance, and they really care about serving good quality. So I think that that's something that when you've got a recipe of products or USPs like that, I think that it's just a shame that it's not being shouted at about from the rooftop. So I think, and also there are some amazingly large companies that are within the Scottish seafood industry. So there is just no reason why a collective of people cannot be put together to sort this problem out. That, and again, I wouldn't recommend anything for them that I wouldn't do myself. I'm like I said, I would very much. I have a lot of people in my life that tell me that I'm wrong every day. They're just not here right now, and I love those people. They stress me out. They bother me daily. If we put out an article or a product or an opinion out that they don't agree with, they're going to tell me. And I think I've never really wanted to surround myself with yes people. So, and I guess this is a similar thing. It's a very similar thing that I'm very self-critical. I also have criticism from a network of people, and that it just you can never sit on your laurels. You can never just sit there and say, "Well, we're doing all right now," because things move. The world is a fast-pacing place, and you can't just sit there and say, "But I'm doing okay. I don't need to change anything." So that's one thing we try never to do.
I would say my comment, the way I view the comment you made there, one of the most dangerous places you can find yourself and get out if you are is a comfort zone. And I honestly, Stelios, don't know any player in the Scottish seafood industry that would take anything you've said as unjust criticism. And another way I would say it, I always felt myself somebody that came to me with constructive, not having a go, constructive criticism was my best friend. Because it would be what I wanted to hear. You don't always want to hear praise and, oh, you're good and you're this. So, to fold things up, Stelios, how can people find what you do and where you do it? How can they follow you?
So, firstly, we have our website, which is Ceres.shop. Very simply, Ceres, CERES.shop. That is where everything sort of happens. That's our central location, essentially, for everything. On there, you'll find our shop, you'll find our news articles, you'll find our podcast. The podcast, just like yours, is on all the major podcast players. Articles, mostly on the website. And our products are on there as well. Some distributors stock our products, but it's best to get in touch. We do have a distributor page on our website as well. But yeah, it's all online. Ceres.shop is where you can find everything we do, rather than going to social media. We're all on those places as well. So
fantastic. Well, I just have to say thank you very much, Stelios. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and wish
Jim,
you every bit of success.
And before you finish, I want to say well done to everything you've done. And I think it's great what you're doing. And I absolutely adore your passion for the seafood industry in Scotland. I mean, it is borderline obsessive, but it's a healthy obsession. That much is, and I know also that me talking freely with you is what you want. You appreciate that, and I think and I always feel comfortable when I'm on the phone with you, and I like it. And long may this continue, where you're going out there on this quest and enlightening people about seafood.
Thank you, Stelios. I appreciate that, because with the podcast I'm involved in now, I feel as I've said to you, I feel it's my way. I'm not from an arrogance, I'm not saying it's the only way or that, but it's my way of giving something back to an industry that I've had a really good life out of, happy life, met lots of amazing characters and got lots of good memories. So, yeah, thank you.
Well, and if you're ever down this way, we're going to meet up and have something to eat and a coffee for definite.
In a fish and chip shop.
In a fish and chip shop.
Selling Scottish fish.
I'll leave the rest to you. But definitely in a fish and chip shop. Definitely.
Thank you, Stelios.
Thank you, Jim. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you liked it, hit subscribe, share it with a friend, or leave a 5-star review. And if you want to speak with me, visit seafoodmatterspodcast.com.